If you've been inspired by stories of resilience, redemption, and standing up for what you believe in, this channel is for you. Here, we share incredible journeys of individuals who turned betrayal into triumph, fought back against corporate challenges, and reclaimed their careers and legacies. Our stories are all about empowerment, integrity, and the power of perseverance, especially for those who have experienced the highs and lows of professional life. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could inspire your own journey. Join our community of strong, determined individuals who are all about taking control of their futures, no matter the obstacles. Let's build something great together, because your comeback starts here. I didn't even want to go. The email arrived at exactly 9:47 a.m. Subject line: Dinner with the Kendalls, Friday at 7 p.m. A formal invite from HR with a cheerful little smiley face emoji, like that somehow made it friendly. After 25 years of building Horizon data strategies from a cluttered shared office above a tire shop in Albuquerque into a $130 million analytics firm with clients across 5 continents, I was being summoned, not to a strategy session, not to a board retreat, but to dinner with the CEO and his family. My name is Linda, and I was the first person ever hired at Horizon. Back then, we had 2 clients, 1 clunky server, and a fax machine that made more noise than sense. I wrote the first operational manual, negotiated our vendor contracts, did payroll out of a yellow legal pad, and closed the deal that got us into federal contracting. The founder, David Kendall, used to call me the backbone. He'd say, "Linda holds this place together." And I did. For a long time. But over the past year, something shifted. David became aloof. Emails that once got same-day replies now went unanswered. Our Monday catch-ups became biweekly, then sporadic, then gone entirely. And then came the new hires, young, loud, and brimming with TED Talk energy. I could feel the wind changing before the storm hit. So when I got that dinner invitation, I already knew. I just didn't know how cold it was going to be. The restaurant was one of those chic rooftop spots in downtown Phoenix. All exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and kale-based cocktails. I wore a forest green blouse and the pearl necklace my son gave me for my 60th birthday. I looked like an executive because I was one. David was already there, standing beside a table draped in white linen. Beside him, his wife Denise, and their daughter Savannah. Savannah looked like a walking Forbes article. Smooth blonde hair, designer blazer, not a hint of self-doubt. "Linda," David beamed. Arms wide like we were old friends, not colleagues about to have the talk. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. My stomach tightened like a belt one notch too far. Dinner began the usual way. Overpriced wine. Compliments served lukewarm. Savannah asked about the early days, her tone cheerful but patronizing. "It's wild to picture you all working above a tire shop," she said, laughing. I smiled politely. It was less funny when the air conditioning broke mid-July. David cleared his throat. "Actually, Linda saved the company more than once in those early years. She brought in our first 7-figure contract." Savannah nodded with a condescending smile. "Every company has its foundation." I should have walked out right there. But I stayed. I needed to see just how far they'd take it. Halfway through the halibut over lemon couscous, David folded his hands like a man offering grace before a meal. "Linda," he began slowly, "we've been doing some long-term planning. You've been absolutely essential to Horizon's success. Here it comes. But as we move into this next chapter, we feel it's time to inject some new energy, a fresh vision." I kept my expression steady. "Savannah just completed her executive innovation program at Wharton," he added proudly, like I hadn't mentored a dozen Ivy League graduates over the years. "She has big ideas: blockchain, automation, brand revitalization." "Sounds ambitious," I said calmly. "What's the transition plan?" 6 weeks, David said, relaxing. "She'll shadow you initially. We want this to feel respectful, collaborative." I nodded, took a sip of wine, and smiled. They thought they were phasing me out. They didn't realize I was already 3 moves ahead. Folded his hands, the same way he used to when he was about to bluff through a tough pitch. Only this time, he wasn't sitting across from a venture capitalist. He was sitting across from me. Linda, he began, keeping his tone light, you know how grateful I am for everything you've done here. The company wouldn't be what it is today without your dedication. I gave a polite nod but didn't smile. You forgot I still have skin in this game, Doug. And not just memories or plaques on the wall. I'm still a stakeholder, legally, not sentimentally. He shifted in his leather chair, the one I'd once helped pick out when we opened this office. We figured you'd liquidated long ago. Most early folks did when series became through. Most people didn't pull us out of a $2 million shortfall in 2005 with one contract, I said calmly, sliding the documentation closer to him. Most didn't get equity quietly assigned to them when you couldn't meet payroll for 6 weeks. Doug went quiet. For a man who'd made his living being a visionary, he'd apparently stopped looking behind him. He hadn't expected I'd still be keeping score. So, what's your play? He asked finally. Transparency, I replied. I want a clear transition plan. Public, formal, and dignified. Not this smoke and mirrors performance you tried to stage over seared tuna and Cabernet. He gave a short laugh, more from nerves than humor. You want to be part of the announcement. I want control over how it's framed. My name, my role, and the legacy I built aren't footnotes for your daughter's resume. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You always did have timing. I leaned forward. And you forgot I always kept the receipts. By Thursday, the office buzz had shifted. A calendar invite labeled Strategic Transition Planning appeared on leadership's shared schedule. Harper wasn't on the attendee list. Neither was Patrice. Just Doug, me, and one of our original legal advisors. The meeting was in person. I made sure of that. That afternoon, I wore the navy blazer I'd kept pressed in the back of my closet, the one from our IPO day. I walked past the open concept kitchen where Harper was loudly explaining blockchain to a product manager. She didn't look up. Inside the conference room, I laid out my terms. I would remain on through the next quarter as an advisor, with full oversight of all public messaging and internal briefings related to the leadership shift. I would speak to the team myself, not through an HR memo. And the final press release would include acknowledgement of my stake, contributions, and equity retention. Doug didn't argue. He knew he couldn't afford to, legally or reputationally. Later that week, I stepped onto the small stage in the main office to deliver a farewell message. Faces I'd known for decades, and some I'd only seen on Slack turned toward me. I spoke plainly, with warmth, and without bitterness. I've had the honor of growing this company from the ground up, I said. And though leadership is evolving, I want you to know value isn't about trendiness or titles. It's about consistency, courage, and care. That's what built Horizon, and that's what will carry it forward. There was a long, sincere round of applause. As I stepped down, Luis caught my eye and gave me a small, proud nod. I returned it. Because while they had tried to write me out quietly, I'd chosen to sign off on my own terms, with dignity intact, legacy secured, and ownership right where it belonged. In my hands, his name was Greg Fallon. Not Doug. Not some relic from a startup dream. Greg was polished, corporate, and ready to hand me a polished goodbye. We were in Seattle now, not a garage in Palo Alto. And I was no longer Mia, I was Celeste Brannon, 62 years old, and the former heart of Cascade Systems. Celeste, there's no reason to make this difficult, Greg said, palms flat on his sleek walnut desk. We're sending you off with honor. Full benefits. An exit bonus. A consultant title if you'd like it. I'm not walking out just yet, I replied, voice smooth. I'll guide the handover. I'll do it respectfully. But if Harper intends to gut our infrastructure or slap a new logo on 10 years of work, I expect to be in the room. Greg's face stiffened. This isn't personal. You're clinging to something because it feels familiar. No, I said, rising. I'm standing for what I helped create. I didn't wait for him to respond. Let him sit with that. That night, I opened a worn file box beneath my bed, layered in dust and time. Inside, early business plans scribbled during weekend marathons, wireframes we once pinned to our living room wall, pitch notes from the company's first client in Spokane. And there, near the bottom, something I hadn't laid eyes on in over a decade, a 2006 non-compete addendum, signed by Greg himself, affirming that any tools I'd brought into Cascade from my private consulting work remained partially mine by default. Proprietary tools. Code libraries. Data modeling logic. The kind of document no one expects you to keep. But I keep everything. The next morning, I sat across from my old friend, Yvonne Patel, a formidable intellectual property attorney now, running her own firm in Capitol Hill. We sipped cappuccinos under soft jazz and blooming tulips. Do I have a leg to stand on? I asked as I passed her the papers. She turned the page with a knowing grin. Celeste, you've got more than a leg. You've got leverage. They didn't plan for this. I leaned back, a decade of fatigue and silent resentment peeling away. They think I'm a footnote. Yvonne grinned. Then let's remind them that footnotes carry the receipts. By Friday, the corridors of Cascade were filled with curiosity. Whispers. Nervous glances. Why hasn't Celeste left yet? Why is she still attending operations briefings? What's she waiting for? I walked those halls with steady steps, nodding to teams I'd mentored and systems I'd built from scratch. They'd tried to write my ending at that dinner. But I had picked up the pen. Monday morning, Harper slid into my old office chair, casually sipping oat milk latte like she belonged there. No formal announcement, just attitude. She asked questions with sugary intonation, but shark-like eyes. So, do you really review the client SLAs yourself? She asked, holding a document upside down. Every quarter, I said. That's how we caught the AWS filling overages before Q3 last year. She blinked. Wouldn't a bot catch that? If you build it right, I replied. But bots don't chase inconsistencies across 12 dashboards. She smiled, tight, artificial. You're very analog, huh? I just shrugged. Analog kept our contracts renewed through 3 recessions. But by all means, try your way. That didn't sit well. 2 days later, Harper held a vision session for senior staff. I wasn't invited. Luis, ever loyal, quietly forwarded me the email. Subject line: Cascade 2.0. The future begins now. The agenda? Rebranding. Freeze on hiring legacy team roles. Potential outsourcing of infrastructure. I actually laughed. Harper thought outsourcing our infrastructure would save money. But our clients didn't stay for budget dashboards. They stayed because when their servers crashed at 2 a.m., we answered the call. She didn't know our soul. But I did. Watching it unfold like a script I'd already read a dozen times. But this wasn't Mia's story anymore, it was now Elaine's. Elaine Winters, 62, had weathered far worse storms in the tech corridors of Pittsburgh. She wasn't some relic clutching onto the past. She was the reason the company had a present. And now a woman nearly half her age stood on stage at the newly rebranded Nexus Point Analytics, announcing the future with all the authenticity of a LinkedIn post drafted by AI. Elaine didn't blink, didn't flinch, just leaned back in her chair as the employees around her shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced her way, quietly waiting for a reaction. Harper, or rather Haley, in this version continued without pause. We're entering a bold new phase. More automation. Agile teams. Smarter scaling. Buzzwords, Elaine thought. All frosting, no cake. That afternoon, Haley sent out her first internal memo. All departments were to submit efficiency reports and preliminary staffing adjustments within the next 10 days. Elaine's name was conspicuously missing from the CC list. Didn't matter. Elaine already had 3 calls scheduled for that evening, one with a former CTO who had exited with similar grace under fire, one with her IP lawyer Jane, and one with the head of procurement from a legacy client that accounted for nearly 22% of their annual revenue. The same client Haley had just proposed migrating to a third-party platform to streamline service. By 7 p.m., the wheels were in motion. Elaine forwarded Haley's whiteboard notes to Jane, attaching time-stamped documentation proving original authorship. A folder titled Foundations version 1.3 went with it, every feature, every protocol, and every post-acquisition improvement she'd architected. She wasn't being petty. She was protecting her name. Around 9 p.m., Elaine's front porch was quiet. A summer breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle from her neighbor's yard. Her dog, Rupert, snored lightly by her feet. With a refill of Pinot Noir in hand, she reviewed the final draft of her resignation letter, not to be sent yet, but ready. She wanted the terms right. Not an exit. A transfer of equity under her conditions, with full protection of intellectual contributions and advisory status retained. They would either accept or face a full audit of ownership claims. She didn't need to threaten. She just needed to inform. By Friday, the tone in the office had shifted. Haley passed her in the hallway and offered a chirpy morning, like none of this was happening. Elaine nodded, but didn't slow her stride. Vanessa stopped by her office that afternoon. "Everyone's watching you," she said. "What are you going to do?" Elaine didn't hesitate. "Whatever I must." Monday brought whispers of investor unrest. 2 major clients had requested meetings. One specifically asked if Elaine would be attending. She wasn't on the calendar yet. But her name had weight, and Haley was quickly learning that influence doesn't come with a job title. At the next board call, Elaine finally spoke up. "Before we move forward with structural changes," she said, "I'd like to review the founding documents, especially the clauses on proprietary assets and majority consent." Silence. Then one of the board members cleared his throat. "Of course, Elaine. We'll make sure those are available." She smiled. Calm. Poised. Certain. Haley thought she'd arrived at a finish line. But Elaine Winters had only just laced up her shoes. "Would you like me to continue the next chapter of Elaine's quiet but strategic power play?" I scanned the auditorium. Most employees wore tight expressions, eyes flicking between the floor and the screen. Jane from legal looked completely blindsided. Amir kept glancing at me, clearly unsure of how to react. The slide behind Haley now read, Operational Efficiency Realignment, Initial Execution Phase. That's when my hands went still in my lap. The plan outlined cuts to core infrastructure, offshoring IT services, department consolidation, and a vague bullet point labeled leadership modernization. They didn't need to say it outright. I was the dinosaur in the room, and they were ready to pull the plug. After the crowd began shuffling out, Haley caught up to me near the back stairwell, her voice syrupy smooth. "Elaine, I trust you'll approach this with maturity." People look to legacy figures to set a tone. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean women who've survived 3 executive regimes and kept this company from buckling?" She gave a smile with no warmth behind it and walked off, heels echoing like punctuation marks on tile. By 2 o'clock, an email from HR landed in my inbox. Severance terms. Non-disparagement language. A knowledge handoff clause that would have required me to spend 6 weeks handing over my life's work to a 29-year-old who thought process documentation was optional. That's when I knew they'd crossed the line. I walked into Robert's office, Doug's replacement, the so-called transitional CEO. His body language told me everything. He was expecting the storm. "Elaine," he said, standing. "You let your COO float a restructuring slide without warning. You let her imply I'm outdated. Then you send me a packet asking me to gift wrap my contributions." He sighed. "That's not how we intended it." "It's exactly how you meant it," I replied, placing the folder gently on his desk. "And let's get one thing straight. I'm not agreeing to any of it." He rubbed his forehead. "Then we're left with involuntary severance." "You're forgetting something," I said, pulling out a thinner folder from my bag. "I still hold equity." And under the original governance charter, any leadership displacement requires board consensus. You go forward without it, and you'll be in breach. His face lost a bit of color. Haley's presentation might look glossy, I added, but she's gutting systems the company can't afford to lose. Her automation scheme? It's non-compliant with our federal contract obligations. He leaned back slowly, saying nothing. I'm not here to torch the place, I said. But I won't be a doormat on my way out either. That evening, I met Jane and Amir at a coffee shop that didn't ask questions. I handed each of them a sealed envelope. What's this? Jane asked, sliding hers open. Documentation. Everything we built. Dated, archived, and legally registered. What we created wasn't just code, it was protected work. You're suing? Amir asked. Only if I have to. But I'm making sure you two stay protected. Haley's planning more cuts. She's even drafting a media statement. Jane exhaled. This is all about the acquisition, isn't it? They're polishing the firm to look lean and disruptive, I said. You going to block it? No, I said, sipping my tea. I'm going to guide it. Over the next 72 hours, I became invisible but deliberate. Melissa filed a formal cease and desist against unauthorized reuse of the legacy code. I issued a letter to the board insisting on a third-party audit before any asset reallocation. And over lunch with Technova's CEO, I dropped one sentence. Nexus points changing hands. Soon. His fork paused midair. Interesting, he said, smiling slightly. That lines up with the recent resumes landing in my inbox, I said with a hint of amusement. Across the table, Callum gave a small nod, the wheels clearly turning. If you're interested, I could point you to the systems that matter and to the people who can actually keep them running. By the end of the week, the tension around Darcy was visible. Her voice had lost its smooth polish in meetings. There was a sharpness to her tone now, and the grins she wore had grown forced. The confidence was wearing thin because the staff she assumed were hers to command were beginning to shift their gaze back to me. And I didn't need to gloat. I just kept steady, knowing full well that the storm she triggered had already met the safeguards I'd set in place years ago. By Tuesday, 3 of her pet projects had imploded. The vendor switchover she had promised would save money was stuck in limbo, thanks to a critical integration tool mysteriously disappearing from the backend. That tool, by the way, had been crafted by Emmett, who simply never updated it for the new system. The rebrand campaign? On indefinite hold after the legal department flagged an infringement issue with a boutique firm in Vermont. I might have made a quiet phone call. And as for the new client forecasting platform, it buckled under pressure when tested with real data, returning flawed predictions and triggering 3 urgent support tickets from long-standing customers. Darcy didn't back down. No, she doubled her bets. That afternoon, she summoned every senior manager to the conference room. These hiccups are natural during transformation, she said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. Real growth requires discomfort. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Transformation isn't about throwing out the scaffolding before the building's done. She kept smiling, tight-lipped. Thank you for your input, Laurel. Neil, seated beside her, didn't even try to cover his disinterest. Once a steady presence, now he was just another figurehead, watching the whole ship veer off course while pretending to steer. Later, Camille pulled me aside near the elevators. 3 legacy clients reached out, worried about service quality, one hinting at leaving if response times slip again. I nodded. And I'm guessing Darcy hasn't answered their emails? She thinks they'll wait. They won't. That night, I opened my laptop and composed a short message to Callum Breyer. Subject, our coffee chat. Body, if the interest is real, now's the time. Callum was CEO at Brightpath Systems. Their leadership had been eyeing Rainsford Tech for months, waiting for a sign of instability. I didn't need to sabotage anything. I just needed to confirm what they were already sensing, that the foundation was shifting. The next morning, I found Darcy in my former office, lounging like it was hers by birthright. She was tossing a branded stress ball in the air. Didn't even glance up when I entered. "Do you need something?" she asked, dismissive. "Just a moment. Make it brief." I stepped in, calm, unshaken. "You're bleeding this company dry," I said. That got her attention. "I know you think buzzwords and bold claims will win loyalty. But this place was never about flash. It was built on function, on loyalty, on people who actually know what they're doing." She stood, arms crossed. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a warning." "To what?" "Step aside for you." I smiled faintly. "No. To stop mistaking arrogance for leadership. If you want to lead, Darcy, then lead. But don't set fire to the ground just to see if the ashes will rise." She didn't reply. I didn't wait. That afternoon, Martin requested a private conversation. No aides, no Darcy. Just us. He looked worn down, like the weight of the last few weeks had finally started to show. "Laurel," he said, settling into the chair across from mine. "What do you want?" I let the silence stretch before answering. "I want acknowledgement. Not a buyout. Not a vanity title. Just honest recognition." He sighed, dragging a hand across his forehead. "The board's unsettled. They're seeing the cracks, seeing your name still connected to every essential platform." "They should be unsettled," I said calmly. "They entrusted a multimillion-dollar enterprise to someone who sees institutional knowledge as a threat instead of a strength." He lowered his voice. "And Brightpath?" I didn't respond directly, just offered a measured smile. "Callum and I had a productive lunch. The door is open, but I haven't stepped through it yet." Martin actually looked at me then. Not like a manager trying to maintain control, but like someone seeing the situation clearly for the first time in a long while. "You could just leave all this behind." "I could," I replied, "but I won't. Not when everything I built still stands: systems, trust, infrastructure. If they want to keep using it, they'll have to do it the right way. On my terms." That evening, Camille sent me a brief message. Client Delta just filed a formal concern with the board. I typed back 2 words. "Stay ready." Darcy still had the floor, but I had the foundation. And with a few precise moves, I'd be holding the script in my hands. By Thursday, the boardroom felt like a pressure chamber. Full bodies, full silence. The kind of air you don't breathe so much as survive. It was a special session called Last Minute. Present were the board members, Martin, interim execs, department leads, and me. Martin looked drained, aged. Darcy sat beside him, fidgeting with a pen she hadn't used once. Directly across from me sat Callum Breyer, now representing Brightpath not as a friend, but as a potential acquirer. His face was neutral, cold even. The look of someone deciding whether to buy or break. Celeste, the board chairwoman, cleared her throat and began. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we need to confront the unresolved matters." She gestured toward me. "Laurel has submitted information, contractual obligations, operational gaps, legacy documentation that was not previously included in the transition analysis." Heads turned. Martin's jaw tightened. Darcy's eyes widened like she'd just realized she was playing in a different league. Celeste continued, "Per our governance agreement, any structural shift affecting shareholders with over 3% stake requires unanimous approval." She nodded toward me. "Laurel, would you like to speak?" I rose. No theatrics. Just a steady presence. "I'm not here to dismantle anything," I said evenly. "That's never been my intent. For more than 20 years, I've poured my skills, time, and heart into this company. And somewhere along the line, that started being seen as disposable." I didn't look at Darcy, though I felt her tense beside Martin. "I don't need control. I don't need credit. But I do need the work to be respected. I need the leadership in this room to understand that nothing, no growth, no rebranding, no strategic pivot can succeed without respecting the groundwork beneath it." The room held its breath. Then Callum leaned forward, breaking the quiet. "We've been monitoring the situation closely," he said, scanning the table. "3 of your top-tier clients have now raised flags. Loud ones. 2 clients have frozen renewals," Callum continued, his tone clipped. "And based on what our analysts uncovered, the infrastructure that gives Redwood Systems its edge isn't nearly as self-operating as your team represented." His attention slid toward Darcy. She didn't move. Then, shifting his focus to the board, "Our proposal remains on the table, but it hinges on dependable leadership. As things stand, we're not moving forward under the current transition plan." Translation: Darcy was the liability. Martin started to speak, but Celeste raised a palm. "Let's break for 10 minutes. The room emptied fast. Board members murmured in tight circles. Staff shuffled toward the corridor with unreadable expressions. I stayed put. So did Darcy. She turned to face me. There was no armor left in her voice. "I didn't come here to break things." I held her gaze. "You wanted to leave a mark." "That's not the issue. The problem is, you started tearing down walls before asking why they were built. You treated everyone like obstacles. And you treated me like I didn't matter." Her shoulders dropped. "What happens now?" I leaned forward. "That's out of my hands. The decision's theirs." 10 minutes later, we reassembled. Celeste remained standing. "Effective immediately," she said with cool authority, "Darcy Lane is dismissed from her transitional leadership duties. Martin Caldwell will serve in an advisory role through the acquisition phase." Then she turned to me. "Laurel Wynn will head the interim advisory unit, reporting directly to the board and our potential partners at Brightpath." I gave a single nod. No grin. No satisfaction. Just confirmation. By Friday, I signed my consulting agreement, triple my former compensation, total control over integration processes, and final say on systems continuity. Darcy left without a sound. No farewell message, no send-off. Martin found me in the lobby before heading out for the last time. He extended his hand. "I didn't fight hard enough for you," he said. "I know," I replied gently. 2 months later, Redwood was officially part of Brightpath Innovations. The majority of staff stayed. I handpicked the new leadership. Camille became head of ops. Jonah took charge of systems architecture. Over half the company reported to individuals I had mentored for years. I didn't return to my old corner suite. Instead, I worked from a modest office in my lakeside home, a place where the breeze slipped through the windows, and twice a week, I walked out barefoot with coffee in hand, watching the sun lift over the water while analytics rolled in across the screen. The infrastructure I'd built still held steady. Quiet. Unshakable. One evening, a message came from Celeste. Subject: Impact. "Laurel, what you did, the grace, the clarity, we haven't seen anything like it. You didn't just salvage a company. You redefined leadership." I stared at the email for a long time. It had never been about control, or payback, or status. It was about worth. Recognizing it, protecting it, and never letting anyone define it for you again.